Jon Snow was not supposed to learn the truth so soon. He was not supposed to glean the secret of his birth, the truth that held him in such precarious place between prophecy and peril. Yet in the quiet hours before dawn, tucked away in the underbelly of the Red Keep, that was precisely what happened. The discovery did not come from the lips of Eddard Stark, nor from any living soul sworn to silence. It came instead from the diaries of a maester no longer living, half-forgotten pages stored in a dusty alcove behind the common records. Jon had always been quiet, but curiosity beckoned him to search. Perhaps he sought answers about his mother, or simply yearned to understand the father who claimed him as a bastard. Perhaps there was something in the Stark blood that urged him to unearth hidden truths. In any case, the discovery he made would change the course of his life and the fate of the Seven Kingdoms. He had stolen into that hidden library, the small stash of old records assigned for disposal under the nose of Master of Laws Renly Baratheon's new scribes. While others in King's Landing found themselves deep in slumber, Jon found himself perched before a flickering candle, scanning lines that made little sense at first. A record of births and ships manifests, some ledgers of the Targaryen treasury from a time before the rebellion. And then, as though hidden by an invisible hand, something else, a series of carefully coded passages seemingly about Rhaegar Targaryen and a certain secret marriage. Jon's heart began to pound so loudly he thought it might echo in the empty stone halls. That night, the words swam before his eyes, the references to an heir of the dragon born in the Tower of Joy, hidden away among the loyal. The more he read, the more his skin prickled with a cold sweat. He had grown up as a boy who believed he had no mother of note. Ned Stark's cryptic remark that she was Willa had never satisfied him. Jon had endured the sideways glances from lords and ladies alike, bastardy stigma always reminding him that he would never stand on equal footing with his siblings. Yet if these words were true, it meant he was no bastard at all. Some part of him did not wish to believe it. The Targaryens were gone, slain by the rebellion that had placed King Robert Baratheon on the Iron Throne. The dragon was dead, or so the realm believed. But if Rhaegar Targaryen had wed Lyanna Stark, if a secret ceremony had been blessed by the faith, then the child they produced was not a bastard. He would, in fact, be heir to a throne lost. The diaries lacked final clarity, but there was enough there for Jon to suspect the unthinkable, that he, the boy raised in Winterfell as a dishonored child, was the last living scion of House Targaryen. He dared not breathe a word to any soul in King's Landing, not then. Not while Ned Stark still played the game so carefully, keeping his silence, hiding what must have been the greatest secret in the realm. But Jon could not keep from confronting his father in his chambers. The look in Lord Stark's eyes when Jon revealed what he knew was one of mingled sorrow and fear. Fear for Jon's life, and for the threat that knowledge posed to Robert Baratheon. Ned Stark had not intended for the truth to surface so soon. Indeed, he had never intended for Jon to know while Robert still sat the throne. But Jon, earnest and headstrong, pressed until Ned could deny him no longer. "You are my sister's boy," Ned had said at last, the weary lines etching deeper across his face. "I swore an oath to her upon her deathbed that I would guard you as my own. King Robert would never have let you live had he known. And so I told a lie that weighed on my conscience every day since. I'm sorry, Jon." The breath left Jon's lungs as though someone had struck him in the chest. It was one thing to suspect, to guess in the dead of night with only a candle's flame as companion. It was something else entirely to hear it from Eddard Stark's lips. Yet it was not only shock that Jon felt, it was a burning sense of injustice. He remembered the insults that had chased him his whole life. Snow, they called him as if it were carved into his flesh. He recalled how Catelyn Stark had kept him at arm's length, how her eyes had burned with resentment whenever he lingered too near her trueborn children. He thought of how in his youth he had to watch from the sidelines, excluded from small ceremonies of Winterfell, never quite accepted. If all that were built on a falsehood, if he was not truly a bastard at all but the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, why was he made to bear this shame? Ned Stark, as if reading Jon's thoughts, placed a hand on his shoulder. It had to be so. Robert's wrath is as unyielding as the winter wind, and it would have claimed you. The realm believed Rhaegar to be its greatest villain, a man who abducted my sister. The truth was more complicated. They loved each other, Jon. Yet that cannot matter now. It was enough that Robert believed otherwise and that your life was in danger every day that followed. So I had to keep you hidden behind the name Snow. Jon's mind reeled. He felt as though the world had shattered under his feet. Duty, honor, love, they warred inside him. 1,000 questions clawed at his throat, none able to find voice. When at last he found words, they trembled with equal parts fear and fury. Then who am I truly? "You are my nephew," Ned said quietly, "and you are the blood of the dragon. I beg you, Jon, do not speak of this beyond these walls. If Robert learns, if he even suspects, you will die." Jon saw, in that moment, the love in Ned Stark's eyes. The father who had raised him was giving him a chance to walk away from the truth, to keep his identity hidden for his own safety. But the fires of youth and indignation flared in Jon's heart. Was he to continue as a bastard, living in the shadows, denied the birthright that was his by right of blood? How was that fair? The realm might fear a Targaryen, but Jon had done no wrong. He had never asked for war or rebellion. He had been an infant during Robert's rebellion and innocent in every sense. Yet if Jon spoke, if he staked his claim, would it not plunge the realm into chaos? He could not sleep that night. He wandered the dark corridors, hearing the distant calls of gold cloaks patrolling the keep. He pictured Robert Baratheon, the hulking king who had seized the crown with warhammer in hand, who had cut down Rhaegar on the trident. If Robert discovered that Rhaegar's son lived, would he take up his warhammer once more? Or would fear of the old Targaryen might, and perhaps fear of the child's right, drive him to swifter methods? Jon envisioned ravens flying north, carrying the word that Winterfell had sheltered a dragon's egg. He imagined the crown's men riding to seize him, to kill him, to brand Ned Stark a traitor. He saw blood on the snow. But there was a voice inside him that demanded justice, that demanded recognition. And it was not only the Targaryen part of him, there was something in the Stark blood that bristled against the idea of living a lie. If he was truly not Snow but a Targaryen, that meant all the humiliations he'd suffered had been inflicted on him through falsehood. In the courtyard, the hush of the night broken only by a distant cry of a restless dog, Jon found himself consumed by the question, could he simply remain silent, bearing the name Snow forever, content in his father's lie? Or should he rise to the challenge, claim his heritage, and endure whatever consequences might come? It was days before he confronted Ned Stark again. Days of living in a half-days, torn between dread and desire. He took his meals scarcely, avoiding the eyes of the other lords and knights who passed him in the corridors. He noticed that Ned seemed more anxious than ever, though he carried himself with the quiet dignity that had become legend. Some nights, Jon heard arguments behind closed doors, Ned and his wife, Catelyn, or Ned and the king's advisor, Lord Varys. The spider wove his webs, and there were rumors that the royal court was fracturing. The Targaryens were dead, to everyone's knowledge, except for Viserys and Daenerys somewhere across the narrow sea. But was it possible that the whisper of another Targaryen might already be circulating? No, that was too dangerous a thought. Jon tried to push it aside, but in that restless twilight he made his decision. What was the point of living if one lived a lie? He was not a man to cower behind someone else's name. The days of calling himself Snow were nearing an end. He would not go quietly into obscurity. If Robert wanted him dead, then Jon would stand and face him. Pride and honor demanded it. Yet the consequences, what would they be? One late afternoon, when clouds the color of slate darkened the sky, Ned and Jon faced each other in the yard near the training grounds. It was the first time Jon had picked up a practice sword since his discovery, and he found that his arms felt heavier than usual. Ned watched him carefully, and Jon could see the concern in his father's eyes. "Jon," he began, "I know what you're thinking. You must understand, you are not simply a man with a claim to the throne. You are a threat to the king, to the entire Baratheon line. If you reveal yourself, there will be no place in this realm that will be safe." Jon gripped the hilt of his wooden sword, feeling the rough splinters dig into his palms. Am I to stay silent forever, father? Am I to watch King Robert revel on the throne that might have been my father's? The realm believes Rhaegar took Lyanna by force. But you said yourself that wasn't the truth. He inhaled sharply. Rhaegar was no monster. Even your friend King Robert has been repeating that falsehood. It is as if the entire realm is built on lies. And I bear the weight of them. Ned's face fell. I swore an oath to Lyanna. She made me promise to keep you safe. The truth didn't matter as much as your life, Jon. That promise kept me from speaking out. But I know now, Jon said, voice trembling. And I can't unknow. Every time someone calls me Snow, it's like an insult to the man I should have been. The man I am. Even Sansa and Arya, my own sisters, look at me differently. They are still your kin, Ned said softly. Half-sisters, true. But that is no small thing in this world. Jon set his jaw. Then let them know me as their cousin, or as the rightful heir if that is what I am. Let them know the truth. He could see the conflict in Ned's eyes, the father torn between protecting his son's life and honoring that son's sense of self. I may die for this, I realize. But I cannot bear to go on living as an unacknowledged bastard. Let me face Robert. Let me face the realm. Whatever comes, I'll face it as a trueborn, not Snow. Ned's voice was rough with emotion. Jon, you do not know what you risk. Jon forced himself to speak words he might regret. I would rather risk everything than continue a lie. For a long moment, Ned said nothing. He looked at his son, his nephew, and Jon thought he saw tears forming. At last, the Lord of Winterfell nodded, albeit reluctantly. I cannot lock you in a tower to keep you safe, he said. If you are set on this, I will stand by you. So it was decided. The next day, Jon approached King Robert himself. He did not do it publicly, for that would have been madness, but he approached when the king was deep in his cups, well away from prying ears. He found Robert in one of the lesser-used halls of the Red Keep, leaning against a stone column. His doublet was stretched tight over his girth, and the smell of wine clung to him like a second skin. Yet Robert's eyes, a vivid blue, were still keen. Jon had known the king for scarcely a month, having accompanied Ned to King's Landing. Robert had always struck him as boisterous, good-humored, but with a violence simmering beneath every laugh. What's this? Robert growled when Jon approached. Ned's boy, come to talk to me about some trifling matter of swords and shields? Or do you want a royal pardon for some mischief? Jon hesitated, feeling his pulse hammer in his veins. The weight of the secret pressed on his tongue, threatening to choke him. But he forced the words out. Your Grace, I come for something far more serious. He glanced around to ensure no one was within earshot. You believe Rhaegar Targaryen abducted Lyanna Stark, do you not? Robert's eyebrows shot up. Instantly, the boisterous, wine-soaked grin was replaced by a dangerous intensity. And so does every good man in this realm. We fought a war over it, boy. Jon drew a breath. But I have cause to believe that what passed between them was not abduction. My Lord Father Ned has always maintained there was more to the story. Robert's fist clenched at that. Has he now? A flicker of suspicion lanced through his gaze. What's your point? Jon thought he might faint from the tension. If Rhaegar and Lyanna were in fact wed, if they bore a child in wedlock, would that child have any claim to the throne? The king's laughter, cold and mirthless, filled the hall. Are you daring to speak to me of Targaryen claims, boy? Which side are you on? Jon swallowed hard. I'm asking a hypothetical, Your Grace. Robert's face was flushed with anger and drink. If such a vile union had occurred, that child would be a threat to the realm. I'd have that child's head on a spike if it ever challenged my reign. His eyes narrowed, searching Jon's face. Why do you ask? Jon did not move. He could feel the pounding of his heart in his ears, feel the dryness in his mouth. This was the moment from which there would be no return. Because, Your Grace, he said as steadily as he could, I believe I am that child. There was a stillness in the air so profound, Jon could feel it pressing in on him. Robert Baratheon did not breathe for the span of several heartbeats. Then his lips parted and a thunderous roar tore from him. You? Have you lost your wits? Is this some jest? Jon did not dare back down. Ned Stark raised me as his bastard, but he is not my father. I read it in Maester Ryan's diaries, accounts hidden away. I confronted Ned, he confirmed it. I am the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, born in the Tower of Joy after their secret marriage. He took in Robert's face, the stunned fury carved into every line. I come to you now, Your Grace, to claim my birthright. Not necessarily the throne, but the truth. I will not hide any longer as Jon Snow. Robert's entire body shook with rage. The heavy muscles of his arms flexed as if he might seize Jon by the throat. A Targaryen? Here, under my nose? 7 hells, the nerve of Ned Stark to bring a viper into the nest. His words seethed with betrayal. And you dare reveal this to me, boy? What do you think you'll gain from such a claim? Jon lifted his chin. I would gain my name. Whether you choose to acknowledge it or not, the truth remains. I don't wish to cause bloodshed, Your Grace, but I refuse to live under a lie any longer. For a terrible instant, Jon thought Robert would strike him dead on the spot. The king's hand twitched and Jon's eyes darted to the warhammer that was not present, but Robert wore a dagger at his hip. The tension crackled, poised on the knife's edge. Then Robert let out a harsh, ragged breath. You come to me to proclaim yourself a Targaryen, and you expect me to just, what? Smile and call you Your Grace? My rebellion was for nothing then. No, Jon said quietly. I expect no crown from you. I only ask for my rightful name and the freedom to live as who I am. Robert's laughter was a harsh bark. Freedom? Boy, do you have any idea the trouble you've caused? If what you say is true, and I'm not saying it is, then you have just put your head on the block. The moment this rumor spreads, half the realm will call for your death. He glared at Jon. Or your coronation, gods forbid. We are not done with Targaryens, it seems. Jon squared his shoulders, the Stark in him bracing for the storm. If you mean to kill me, Your Grace, do it now. I have hidden my entire life. I won't hide anymore. I will not be called a bastard when I am not. Robert's hand drifted near the dagger, but he did not draw it. Those keen blue eyes bored into Jon's. "You are a mad boy indeed, or a brave one." Silence stretched. "Why did Ned keep this from me?" Jon answered with raw honesty. "He feared you would kill me. You always hated Rhaegar, but you loved Lyanna. She was your betrothed. Perhaps, in time, you can accept that Lyanna loved Rhaegar of her own free will." That statement nearly undid Robert's tenuous control. Jon braced for the blow, but Robert only let out a low growl that sounded like a wounded beast. Then the king turned away, pressing a hand to his forehead as if fighting off a throbbing pain. He said nothing, and the silence became oppressive. At last, Robert turned around, and there was something haunted in his gaze. "If Ned swears that you are Lyanna's child, I can't dismiss it outright. Ned does not lie except for you, apparently. The realm must not learn of this. Not now. I'll not see the banners raised again and blood spilled for some Targaryen scion." Robert jabbed a finger at Jon's chest. "You keep silent, do you hear me? If you so much as whisper a word of this to the wrong people, I'll have your head and Ned's too. I am king, and no dragon spawn will supplant me." But Jon was done cowering. "I will keep silent if that is your command, as long as you allow me to take my rightful name. I am no Targaryen loyalist. I bear no love for those who burned innocents. I am of the north, and I'll follow my father's ways. But I will not be Snow any longer." Robert stared at Jon, and the air seemed to thrum with danger. Then the king spat on the stone floor, the spittle red with wine. "Your father's ways? Ned Stark's ways? Or Rhaegar's ways? Seven hells, boy, you don't know who you are. You say you want your name? Fine. You can call yourself by that cursed name, but only behind closed doors if you have the stomach to carry it. You best pray no one overhears. If word spreads, I can't promise you safety." Robert's mouth twisted into a grimace. "Now get out of my sight." Jon bowed stiffly, his heart pounding like a drum. He retreated, wondering if the king would stab him in the back before he reached the corridor. But Robert only stood there, breathing heavily, a storm of memories and anger waging war behind his eyes. Jon fled. He did not speak of the encounter immediately, not even to Ned. He needed time to gather himself, to comprehend the whirlwind that had just swept him up. The king had not ordered his immediate execution, and for that Jon felt both relief and confusion. He could sense that Robert was torn between hatred for Rhaegar and love for Lyanna. The conflict had stayed the king's hand. Jon was as rattled as he was triumphant, uncertain what the days ahead would bring. When he finally told Ned, the Lord's face went white as the winter snows. Ned chided him for his recklessness, but Jon stood firm. "I could not remain silent," he said. "I know the risk, but I am not ashamed. And now the king knows I'm done with living a lie." Ned's mouth was set in a grim line. "Robert may decide, tomorrow or next week, that you're too dangerous to let live. This was a fool's gamble, Jon." "Yet I still draw breath," Jon answered. "He has done nothing. He as much as said I can take the Targaryen name if I keep silent in public. Perhaps in time he'll accept it." Ned regarded Jon with a heavy sorrow in his eyes. "Gods be good, I hope so. But be wary. Robert's mind is as volatile as wildfire. One spark can turn him against you." Jon nodded, but his heart felt lighter. He had declared himself, and he had survived. For now, that would suffice. But the realm had ears, and whispers tend to sprout from the faintest of rumors. Though Jon had confronted Robert in a quiet hallway, word seeped through the cracks of the Red Keep. Some said that Ned Stark's bastard was not so bastardy after all. Others whispered that he was the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and that the king was livid over the discovery. Whispers traveled from scullion to squire, from guard to noble, until the very air of King's Landing seemed alive with gossip. Varys, of course, was at the center of it. The spider wove his webs in every nook and cranny, and soon Ned and Jon were summoned to a private council with the king and his small council. The tension in the room was palpable. Robert sat at the head of the table, his face like thunder. Beside him were the likes of Grand Maester Pycelle, Peter Baelish, Renly Baratheon, and Lord Varys. Their eyes flicked between Jon and Ned as if expecting an explosion. Robert did not wait long. He rose from his seat, his bulk threatening to topple the chair. "By the seven, this nonsense has to stop. We have rumors flying about that this boy is Rhaegar's get. I want the truth, Stark, and I want it now." The hush was absolute. Jon watched Ned with a sense of dread, knowing how heavy the burden of truth would weigh on him. At last, Ned spoke. "The boy is my nephew, your grace," he said softly. "Lyanna bore him before she died." Pycelle gasped, and Baelish's eyes narrowed with predatory interest. Renly, wide-eyed, looked from Ned to Jon as if uncertain whether to laugh or recoil. Varys steepled his fingers. "A remarkable revelation," he said in that soft, unctuous tone, "and potentially quite destabilizing for the realm." Robert slammed his fist on the table. "Destabilizing? That's a mild word for it. If the lords of Westeros hear that the Targaryen line is alive gods, we'll have every malcontent in the realm rallying around him. His gaze bored into Jon. You want the throne, boy? Is that it? Jon forced himself to meet the king's glare. I only want to be acknowledged for who I am. I have no ambition for the throne. You wanted an honorable battle, eh? Don't speak to me of honor, Robert snarled. Your father was the reason for half the bloodshed in that war. A flicker of old anger rose in Jon at the words thrown at Rhaegar, but he kept his voice measured. I am not my father. And you loved my mother once, didn't you? Robert's features contorted. For a moment, he seemed on the verge of violence again. But Renly reached out to place a hand on Robert's shoulder, a silent plea for calm. My king, let us not spill blood here. The boy's claim need not be recognized beyond this council. If it's a matter of hush-hush, we can keep it so. Varys nodded. Yes, a delicate matter to be handled discreetly. Perhaps the realm need never know. If the boy remains quiet. I will not remain quiet, Jon cut in, surprising even himself. I'll not wear the name Snow. I'll not be ashamed of my parents. Let the realm do as it will. In the silence that followed, Baelish's lips curved into a sly smile. Such courage from one so young. Or is it foolhardiness? My dear boy, are you sure you appreciate the magnitude of your declaration? He tilted his head. Every Targaryen loyalist still breathing might flock to your banner the moment they learn of your existence. That would pit you against our dear king here. You might not have the appetite for war, but war may have an appetite for you. Before Jon could respond, Ned stepped forward. We will keep this matter contained, he said firmly. Jon will not call banners. He has no desire to challenge Robert. We only wish for him to be recognized as my sister's son. And what of his father's name? Pycelle asked, peering at Jon through bushy brows. That too, Ned answered, though his voice trembled slightly. He is a Targaryen by blood, though we have no desire for him to assume the trappings of the old dynasty. Robert's head snapped up. No gold dragons on black for him, then? No talk of the rightful heir. Ned shook his head. None. Let him be called Jon Targaryen, yes, but with no designs on the Iron Throne. That is all we ask. Robert looked as if he might explode. He crushed a pewter goblet in his hand, wine spilling over his knuckles. He's a Targaryen, he growled. And a Targaryen who takes up that name is a threat to me whether he wants the throne or not. The realm will see it as such. If I let him live, half the lords might ask why. If I kill him, I'll have Ned Stark's head on a platter from the North's retribution. 7 hells, you put me in a spot, Ned. Ned did not break eye contact. He is Lyanna's son, and you once loved her. If that love remains in your heart, for her sake, spare him. Silence descended once more, each member of the small council looking to Robert for his verdict. The king seemed torn by a war within. At last, he turned a hard stare on Jon. You swear you'll not challenge me, boy? You swear it on your mother's memory. Jon's voice did not waver. I swear I have no desire to sit on your throne. My father died with that crown unclaimed, and the realm has moved on. Robert rumbled low in his chest, glancing at Ned. And will you pledge the North's loyalty to me still, Stark? Ned inclined his head. As I always have, your grace. With that, the king let out a long, weary exhale like a bellows draining. Fine. I'll not murder him. The gods know what Lyanna would say if I did. But keep him on a tight leash, Ned. And I'll not proclaim him Targaryen in any public forum. If he goes about boasting that name, I'll have no choice but to quell that talk, bloodily if necessary. Jon bowed his head. Thank you for sparing me, your grace. Robert snorted. Don't thank me, boy. You've just made both our lives immeasurably more complicated. The meeting dissolved soon after. The tension among the council so thick it could have been cut with a sword. Jon wondered what Littlefinger and Varys might do with such knowledge. He suspected the pair of them would spin these revelations into advantage for themselves. Renly looked at him with something approaching pity, while Pycelle seemed too shocked to do anything but bumble about. Only Ned's stoic presence offered any sense of relief. Jon was alive, and for the moment, recognized in private as Lyanna's son. It was a victory, albeit a tenuous one. Yet the realm would soon stir, for secrets are seldom kept in King's Landing. And Jon's existence was the greatest secret of all. In the weeks that followed, the atmosphere in King's Landing grew taut as a drawn bowstring. Though King Robert had commanded silence, men and women in the Red Keep spoke in hushed tones, each one more certain than the last that a new Targaryen had emerged from the shadows. Where the whispers originated, none could say, but Jon guessed they likely sprang from the small council itself or from one of Varys's countless little birds. Still, rumors seldom remain caged. They fluttered beyond the capital's walls, riding on merchant carts and couriers' horses, slipping through city gates with every traveler. At first, the lords of the Seven Kingdoms received the rumor with skepticism. Another Targaryen? They had heard such nonsense before, usually in the form of pretenders seeking to gather a following. But the talk grew more insistent, and soon reached the ears of powerful men who had once fought under the dragon banner, or at least remembered the Targaryen reign. For some, it stirred old loyalties long thought dead. For others, it fanned new fears and resentments. Jon Targaryen, as the rumor named him, had no official declaration from the Iron Throne, but the name alone was enough to cause a ripple of fascination and alarm. Within the Red Keep, Jon did his best to navigate the uneasy labyrinth of court life. He felt as though every gaze lingered on him too long. Every whisper halted abruptly as he passed. Even the household knights looked at him differently, some with wary respect, others with open hostility. It was a strange new existence. He was no longer dismissed as a bastard boy from the north. People regarded him with curiosity or fear, and the only defense Jon had was the precarious arrangement that the king had agreed to. Ned Stark did what he could to shield Jon. The Lord was a man of few words, but Jon could see the constant worry in his eyes, the lines that deepened on his brow each day. Ned had always despised the intrigues of King's Landing, and now he was caught in the center of the greatest intrigue of all. Jon tried to reassure him, but the older man only shook his head gravely. "If Robert's anger flares again," Ned said one evening, "it might burn us both. Be ever watchful." Jon nodded, though a quiet determination guided him. He had not endured years of shame and secrecy to buckle now. If the realm would view him as a Targaryen, let them see that he was no monster. He trained with the Master-at-Arms in the morning, walked the city under guard by midday, and dined with lords and ladies by night, always watchful for that whispered question, "Are you truly the Dragon Reborn?" He kept his answers polite and noncommittal, but each time the name Snow caught in his throat. He would not disclaim the Targaryen name in private conversation, but he did not openly proclaim it either. One afternoon, as he was sparring in the yard, Ser Barristan and Selmy came to observe. Ser Barristan, the bold hero of a dozen battles, a living legend of the King's Guard. Jon was in the midst of crossing wooden swords with a young knight when he noticed the old man watching him with keen interest. The moment the session ended, Ser Barristan approached, leaning lightly on the white enameled hilt of his sword. "Jon Snow," Ser Barristan said, hesitating briefly over the surname. Jon bowed respectfully, wiping sweat from his brow. "Ser Barristan." They regarded each other for a moment before the old knight spoke in a low voice. "You've been the talk of the Red Keep. There are rumors." Jon clenched his jaw. "I know. It's best not to speak of them." But Ser Barristan persisted. "If you are who they say you are, then you should know that I once served your father, Prince Rhaegar. I fought beside him in the Battle of the Trident." He seemed to struggle for words. "He was a good man in many ways. The realm seldom speaks kindly of him now, but I remember the prince I served. He loved music and he loved his people." Jon felt a lump form in his throat. "You believe it, then?" he asked. "The rumor that I am his son?" Ser Barristan's eyes flicked around to ensure no one was within earshot. "I believe that Lord Stark is not a man prone to deception, and I see much in you that reminds me of Rhaegar. But I serve the king now, and I've sworn to protect him. My counsel to you is to tread carefully. King Robert's hatred for your father runs deep." Jon lowered his gaze. "I know," he said quietly. "I have no wish to make him my enemy." The old knight studied him with a kindly expression. "If that's true, then you must guard your actions. Men will try to use you, Jon, to pit you against the king or to raise you as a figurehead for their own ambitions." Jon thought of Littlefinger's knowing smirk of Varys's placid gaze. "I have no desire to be used." Ser Barristan placed a hand on Jon's shoulder. "Then be as honorable as your uncle. Keep your head low, and perhaps the realm can avoid another war." With that, he offered a small bow and took his leave. Jon stared after the old knight, wondering about the father he had never known. Rhaegar Targaryen, who had risked everything for love, who had died on the trident beneath Robert's warhammer. Jon felt a twinge of longing and anger both. He wished he could have asked Rhaegar why he had chosen this path, why he had left the realm to tear itself apart over the notion of a kidnapped maiden. But the ghost of Rhaegar offered no answers. Jon returned to his training, each strike of the practice sword landing with renewed vigor as though punishing a phantom. By the time he collapsed, sweat-drenched and panting, he felt no peace, only a burning sense of destiny he could not name. As the days lengthened, word reached King's Landing that lords in the Reach and the Stormlands were beginning to whisper about the Targaryen boy in the capital. The Tyrells, who had once fought for the Targaryens at the tail end of Robert's rebellion, remained circumspect, but smaller houses swore that they would ride for the dragon if the time came. Meanwhile, in the Riverlands, men who had followed Rhaegar in battle remembered him fondly, grumbling that King Robert's rule had grown slothful and corrupt. Robert, for his part, drowned his anxieties in wine and feasting. He threw lavish banquets to distract the court, roaring with laughter as jugglers performed and bards sang bawdy tunes. Yet underneath the surface, the king's temper was fraying. One night, during a grand feast in the throne room, Jon caught the king glaring at him across the high table, knuckles white around his goblet. Jon wondered if Robert imagined Rhaegar's face superimposed over his own. The intensity of that stare made Jon's stomach coil with dread. He had sworn he would not challenge the throne, but that promise alone might not quiet Robert's conscience. Cersei Lannister, the queen, watched all this with cool detachment. Her green eyes flicked to Jon with something akin to calculation. She never approached him directly about the rumors, yet Jon sensed the weight of her scrutiny. The Lannisters had a stake in the current regime, with Cersei as queen and her children next in line. The existence of a Targaryen scion threatened that future, no matter Jon's intentions. He was not blind to the danger she posed. If the queen believed he could endanger her children's claims, she might ensure his sudden disappearance. The Red Keep had many dark passages, after all, and the gold cloaks were loyal to those with the money to buy them. Days turned to weeks, and still the tension built. Ned Stark tried to arrange a private audience with Robert, hoping to ease the king's mind. But Robert rebuffed him, lost in a swirl of hunts, tourneys, and half-hearted attempts at merrymaking. The lords and ladies of the court were too distracted by the next rumor, the next scandal. Everywhere Jon went, he sensed watchers. Even the crows perched atop the castle walls seemed to stare at him accusingly. One evening, as Jon sat in his modest chambers, a soft knock came at the door. He opened it to find Renly Baratheon, the king's younger brother, clad in a fine green doublet. Renly offered a charming smile. "Might I come in?" Jon hesitated, but stepped aside. Though he had no particular warmth for Renly, he respected his carefree spirit. Closing the door behind them, Jon gestured for Renly to sit. The Baratheon prince did so gracefully, then studied Jon with an appraising gaze. "I hear you've become the most talked-about figure in the city. I wanted to see how you're holding up." Jon shrugged, folding his arms across his chest. "I survive. I doubt you came here only to check on my well-being." "What do you want, my lord?" Renly chuckled. "Straight to the point. Very Stark of you." He leaned forward. "I've been hearing interesting things from certain lords. They believe you might be a rallying cry against my brother. They see in you a chance to break from Robert's rule, which they claim is growing weaker. Some are even going so far as to mention the name Blackfyre, referencing those old pretenders who tried to usurp the Targaryen line. The notion of an alternative king, especially one with Targaryen blood and Stark ties, well, that stirs the pot." Jon frowned. "I have no intention of becoming their figurehead. I told Robert as much." Renly raised an eyebrow. "And yet, if enough powerful houses decide otherwise, you may find yourself a king in all but name. These are dangerous currents, cousin. Pardon me calling you that, but you are technically my cousin by some twist of lineage." Jon managed a humorless smile. "The lines do get tangled, don't they?" "They do indeed," Renly said lightly. Then his tone grew more serious. "I've come to warn you, if you'll accept it as such. My brother's patience runs thin. He's never been adept at subtlety, and these rumors, these whispers of a new Targaryen threat, are driving him to a breaking point. If you wish to live, you might consider a more public show of fealty. Something to prove you are no threat." Jon's pride bristled. "A show of fealty? Am I to kneel before him and swear I'll never claim what's mine by birth?" Renly shrugged, attempting a conciliatory smile. "It might spare your life, and it might buy you time to figure out what you truly want. If you have no lust for the throne, then a public pledge of loyalty harms you little, does it?" Jon felt torn. It rankled him to kneel before a man who had killed his father, no matter how brutal Rhaegar's defeat might have been. Yet he also knew that open defiance could lead to his death. You think that alone will ease the king's mind? Renly's expression turned rueful. I doubt anything truly eases Robert's mind these days, but a dramatic gesture might cool his temper. He's a simple man at heart. Show him fealty. Let the realm see your subservience, and perhaps he'll stop dreaming of crushing your head with his warhammer. He stood, smoothing his doublet. Think on it. I speak out of concern. You might not believe it, but I'd rather not see more blood spilled in the name of monarchy. He departed, leaving Jon in a haze of conflicting emotions. A public pledge, a kneeling before Robert. Could that truly solve anything? Or would it only confirm Jon's place as a docile pawn? The name Targaryen weighed heavily on him, but so did his Stark heritage. He recalled Lyanna's legacy, how she had chosen love over duty and the kingdom had burned for it. Would his choice now light another conflagration? That night, Jon sought counsel from Ned. They spoke under the cover of darkness in a secluded corner of the Red Keep's gardens. Torchlight flickered on Ned's stern face as Jon relayed Renly's suggestion. The Lord of Winterfell exhaled through his nose, a gesture of deep contemplation. Renly is not wrong, Ned admitted quietly. Robert is volatile. A pledge might buy you safety. Jon felt frustration rise. Must I then kneel to the man who slew my father, proclaim my loyalty to the throne that was usurped? Ned's jaw tightened. It was no mere usurpation, Jon. Rhaegar took Lyanna away, it sparked a rebellion. The truth is complicated, but to the realm, Robert's cause was just. Rhaegar lost, and in war, the victor claims the spoils. His gaze softened. But this isn't about Rhaegar anymore. This is about you and your survival. I will not force you to bend the knee, but I would be remiss if I did not remind you that death looms as the alternative. Jon turned away, his voice raw. I wish none of this had ever come to light. I wish I were still ignorant, just the bastard boy of Winterfell. Ned rested a hand on Jon's shoulder. Knowledge can be a burden, but it also grants you power. You are no bastard, Jon. You are the son of my sister. I see her in your eyes every day, and I loved her more than life itself. This realm does not reward honesty or gentle hearts, but that does not mean we forsake them. Jon swallowed, recalling the gentleness with which Ned had always treated him, even when others scorned him. I will think on what I must do. And so Jon passed several sleepless nights weighing the options. On the one hand, a public declaration of loyalty would assure Robert that Jon had no designs on the Iron Throne. On the other, it would require Jon to set aside all pride and sense of justice for Rhaegar's memory. He questioned whether that memory even deserved his devotion. He had never known the man, and the realm believed Rhaegar responsible for countless deaths. Yet the more he thought, the more he realized he could not hold the father he'd never met above the living man who had raised him. Eddard Stark's counsel was what he trusted. Thus, on a misty morning, Jon requested an audience with King Robert in the throne room. It was not a time of public court, and only a handful of guards and courtiers were present. Robert eyed Jon from atop the Iron Throne, a massive figure dwarfed by twisted steel. The clang of armor echoed as the gold cloaks stepped aside to let Jon approach the dais. Jon's heart pounded. He had never felt so exposed. Kneeling, he bowed his head. Your Grace, I come to pledge my loyalty, for I bear no arms against you. I would live in peace if you'll grant it. Robert said nothing for a long moment, letting the silence hang. Then, in a voice gruff with suspicion, he asked, And why should I believe you, boy? You are Rhaegar's spawn, for all your fine talk. Jon kept his head bowed. You slew Rhaegar in battle. That was war. I do not seek to avenge him, nor to take what you have won. My home is in the north. I owe my allegiance to Lord Stark, as I always have. My father's blood might be Targaryen, but my heart is Stark. King Robert gave a derisive snort. A Targaryen that begs me for peace. The world has turned upside down. Very well then. You vow that you'll not challenge me, nor incite others to do so. I vow it, Jon said. The words tasted bitter, but he forced them out. On my honor, by the old gods and the new. A hush fell in the throne room. Then Robert rose, descending the steps with ponderous authority. He stopped before Jon, gazing down at him. On your feet, boy. Jon complied, standing before the man who had once hammered the life out of Rhaegar Targaryen on the banks of the Trident. The king stared him in the eye, as if searching for a hint of Rhaegar's spirit within. I accept your pledge, he declared at length. But know this, the moment I suspect disloyalty, I'll end you without a second thought. Are we clear? Jon inclined his head. Yes, your grace. Robert turned away, waving a hand dismissively. Then be gone. If you cause no trouble, you'll have none from me. Jon retreated, heat flooding his cheeks. For better or worse, he had knelt. He had done what was necessary to survive. Yet he could not shake the feeling that something fundamental had broken within him, that the last vestige of Rhaegar's legacy had been cast aside. He tried to tell himself he was not betraying his parents, but rather honoring his mother's house Stark. The realm had enough violence without his adding to it. If Lyanna had died to protect him, then living honorably, peacefully was the best he could do to repay that sacrifice. Still, as he walked away from the throne, he felt the weight of 1,000 stares. The guards, the courtiers, the lingering watchers in the shadows. They all knew the kneeling had been a spectacle, a Targaryen bending before the Baratheon usurper. Some might say he was wise, others might call him craven. The realm would have its opinions, and they would swirl like crows around a battlefield of corpses. But Jon had chosen his path, at least for now. And though the road ahead was perilous, he would walk it with his head held high. Yet peace in the Red Keep remained a fragile veneer. Jon's public act of fealty quelled some of the immediate clamor, but tension lingered beneath the surface like a coiled serpent. Men who had quietly weighed the possibility of rebellion now found their hopes dashed, at least for the moment. Rumors still drifted through the taverns and brothels of Flea Bottom that Robert Baratheon had forced the Dragon Prince to bow. Some hailed it as a triumph, while others claimed it was a stain on the king's honor to keep a living Targaryen near his throne. Meanwhile, quiet pockets of former Targaryen loyalists saw Jon's act as a temporary capitulation, believing he would one day assert his rightful claim. Jon continued his training and studies, determined to remain steadfast. He spent time with Ned Stark whenever possible, gleaning the man's wisdom. In the courtyard, they spoke in low voices, father and son, though a father and son by oath, not by blood. "This was always my dream," Ned said quietly after Jon confided the grief and confusion that plagued him. "To see you safe. Lyanna died believing we could hide you forever. Perhaps we cannot, but for now you live." Jon nodded, recalling the swirl of speculation that hounded him. At times, he wished he could vanish from the South altogether, retreat to Winterfell and let the South devour itself with politics. But he remained bound by duty, entangled in the capital's affairs. He often wondered if he might join the Night's Watch, that ancient order of black-clad brothers who renounced all claims to titles or lands. But that path, while it would free him from court intrigue, would also seal away any chance to honor his lineage. He owed something to Lyanna, if not to Rhaegar. In the weeks that followed, the uneasy stalemate continued. Robert indulged in his pleasures, hunting and feasting while ignoring the deeper cracks forming in the kingdom. The Lannisters grew bolder in court, with Queen Cersei's father, Tywin Lannister, sending messages that demanded more influence. Renly Baratheon, for his part, tried to maintain some cordial relationship with Jon, though they rarely met without an air of polite wariness. Peter Baelish and Lord Varys hovered like shadows, testing each new shift in power. A small step toward resolution came one evening when the royal household dined in the Great Hall. King Robert, flushed with drink, rose to address the assembled lords and ladies. "My good friends," he began, voice booming off the high rafters. "I've heard enough mutterings about the Targaryen in our midst. Let it be known. The boy has sworn fealty. Any man who speaks otherwise is a liar or a fool. The Iron Throne is secure. My throne is secure." A smattering of applause followed, though it sounded forced. Jon remained seated at the lower tables, feeling the weight of that attention. He noticed Cersei's fixed smile, the sly glance of Littlefinger. Ned Stark gave Jon a faint nod, as if to say, "Endure this." So Jon bowed his head, quietly acknowledging the king's words. "Should any man question this arrangement," Robert went on, "he questions my authority. I've bled enough for this realm. I won't bleed further because some half-wit can't let go of old grudges. If you harbor thoughts of placing a dragon on this throne, then you'll meet the might of the Baratheons, the Lannisters, and any loyal lord who values peace over chaos." With that, Robert sat. The tension in the hall ebbed slightly, and the feast continued in relative calm. Jon took a long swig of watered wine, telling himself this was a victory of sorts. The king had stated publicly that Jon was not to be harmed, so long as he kept his vow. But the hearts of men are not so easily soothed. Certain lords left that feast unconvinced. They saw in Jon's Targaryen blood the seeds of a future challenge, a cause around which the discontented could rally. And it was known that the old Targaryen loyalists still lived, scattered though they might be. If ever they united under Jon's banner, war would blossom again. Perhaps not today or tomorrow, but someday. Jon himself felt the stirring of destiny. He had no desire to seize a throne that had been bathed in blood. Yet a voice within whispered that if Robert's rule faltered, if chaos engulfed the realm, it might fall to Jon to restore order. That was the burden of a secret heir, the knowledge that one might be called upon to fulfill a legacy, whether or not one wanted it. In the darkest hours of the night, Jon prayed to the old gods for guidance, unsure if he would ever find peace. Still, he had made his choice. For now, he would remain in King's Landing, walking the razor's edge between acceptance and rejection, biding his time. He would not seek the throne, nor would he deny his blood. He was both wolf and dragon, and that duality might yet shape the realm's future. In quiet reflection, he vowed that if war came again to the Seven Kingdoms, he would fight not for personal gain, but to defend the people from suffering. If the ghosts of Rhaegar and Lyanna watched him, he hoped they would see a man striving to honor both House Targaryen and House Stark. And so the days turned, the seasons shifted, and Jon Targaryen, once Snow, steeled himself for whatever storms lay ahead. The Game of Thrones was far from over, and the final dice had yet to roll. But for the moment, at least, a wary peace held, and the realm drew breath, waiting for the next spark to ignite the tinder that was the legacy of fire and ice. Jon woke the next morning with an uneasy feeling in his chest, as though the dream he drifted through had planted seeds of longing in his heart. They were dreams of a tower wrapped in snow, of Lyanna Stark's faint laughter echoing in a place where sunlight spilled through cracks in old stone. Half-remembered words teased the edge of his consciousness, a promise made, a child born, an entire realm set upon a path of blood. He rose from the straw-filled mattress in his modest chamber and stood a moment at the window, letting the first faint light of dawn wash over him. In the pale sky of King's Landing, gulls circled the harbor, crying out in raucous voices. It struck him again that this southern city would never truly feel like home. His heart remained caught between worlds, the stark north he had always known and a Targaryen heritage that had only recently been laid bare. He dressed quickly. It would not do to be seen lingering when he was under such intense scrutiny from every corner of the Red Keep. As he stepped into the corridor, a pair of gold cloaks cast uneasy glances his way. He could almost read the question in their eyes. Which side of the war, past or future, does this one truly stand on? Jon kept his chin up, ignoring them. His vow to Robert had been made public now, but he knew that many in the castle would not trust it. A Targaryen was a Targaryen, no matter the words of fealty or the kneeling in front of the throne. Even if a part of Jon's soul balked at that name, there was no turning away from it now. He wanted to clear his head. Passing through a small courtyard that lay in partial shadow, he spotted Ser Barristan and Selmy finishing his morning exercises. The old knight, sweat running down his brow, caught sight of Jon and offered a polite nod. Jon could not help but recall their previous conversation in which Ser Barristan had spoken gently of Prince Rhaegar's nature, of the prince's love of music and his sense of duty. In that moment, Jon wondered if Ser Barristan might be the only one in King's Landing capable of seeing him as more than a threat or a curiosity. Yet they were both bound by oaths, to the king, to the realm, and those oaths made any open friendship dangerous. Jon continued on. He intended to find Ned, who might already be at the council chambers. There was always the risk of crossing paths with Cersei or Littlefinger or some other presence of the court. Yet Jon had resolved to move through the Red Keep as he pleased. Fear and caution had their place, but so did open defiance of the rumor mill. If he was never seen, that would only feed the notion that he was hatching treason in secret corners. To walk openly, to act with measured calm, was his best shield against suspicion. And so he forced himself along the winding corridors until he reached a tall set of oaken doors that opened into one of the castle's lesser halls. Inside, he found Ned Stark, Grand Maester Pycelle, and Lord Varys convened around a long table cluttered with scrolls. The spider's eyes darted up at Jon's entrance. Pycelle, pompous and shaky, gave a little start as if startled to see the rumored Targaryen in the flesh. But Ned offered a nod, beckoning Jon closer. "I was about to send for you," Ned said quietly. "The king has commanded me to look into a situation in the Riverlands, some reports of outlaws harassing travelers along the Trident. It may be only the usual brigands, but apparently the lords there have complained loudly enough that Robert wants swift action." Jon glanced at Varys. The man's expression remained serenely unreadable. "Are you traveling to the Riverlands, father?" Jon asked, his voice carefully respectful. Though Ned was in truth his uncle, Jon had lived long enough calling him father that the old habit was hard to break in private. "I may have to," Ned said. Or at least send men. These attacks have grown frequent, and as Hand of the King I have a responsibility. But that's not all. Robert wants you to remain in King's Landing. His voice dropped lower. He insists it's to keep you close under his eye, as he put it. Jon felt a small coil of anger. He fears if I leave, I'll raise a banner. Ned's face hardened. That's the gist of it, yes? Then he sighed. It was not a request, Jon. More like a command. Jon lowered his gaze to the table where half-finished letters lay scattered. I could accompany you to the Riverlands to prove I have no ill intent. But the king wouldn't see it that way, would he? Pycelle cleared his throat, his chains rattling. His grace is understandably cautious. If certain troublemakers saw you riding with a host of armed men, Stark men, no less, they might twist the sight into rumors of rebellion. The realm is unsettled enough. Jon had to bite back a cutting remark. His chest tightened with the knowledge that every step he took was interpreted through the prism of suspicion. If he walked south, it was a march toward rebellion. If he stayed in the capital, it was infiltration of the court. Even bending the knee openly had not settled the matter. It might never be settled, not truly. After a tense beat, Ned placed a firm hand on Jon's arm. We must endure this a while longer. If you remain calm and abide by the king's will, perhaps in time he'll ease his stance. I know it's galling, but it's the better path, Jon finished. He forced a nod, ignoring the taste of bitterness in his mouth. They discussed a few more details of the situation in the Riverlands. Varys had quietly gathered intelligence on these brigands, disparate bands of armed men, leaderless by all reports, harassing caravans and small folk. Some whispered they might be old Targaryen loyalists, others claimed they were simply opportunistic criminals taking advantage of lax law enforcement. We have yet to discover any direct link to the Targaryen cause, Varys intoned, his soft voice dripping with courtesy. But rumors do blame your name, my lord Jon. Whispers say these outlaws call themselves your swords, though I have found no credible evidence they have ever seen you. Jon felt a surge of indignation. I've never met any such outlaws. They've no right to invoke my name. Varys spread his hands in a conciliatory gesture. Of course not. But one cannot stop men from using a convenient rallying cry. Let us hope the Hand's men will put an end to their troublemaking. Jon had no answer. He only nodded curtly and withdrew, leaving Ned and Varys to continue the business of the day. The notion that unknown men might claim to fight in his name hammered home the danger of his position, whether he willed it or not. Targaryen loyalists, or those simply using the Targaryen mystique, could incite violence. And who would King Robert blame then? He took his leave, heading out into the courtyard for a breath of fresh air. The day had grown brighter, the sun climbing over thick walls and spires. A few ravens flapped from the rookery's towers, carrying messages to distant lords. Jon wondered if some of those scrolls concerned him and the ongoing rumor of his claim. Old habit made him want to grit his teeth at the sound of the name Targaryen, but he knew it was pointless to fight what was etched in his blood. A stable boy in Baratheon livery approached, bowing awkwardly. My lord Jon. Are you to ride out today? The lad had a dusting of freckles and looked at Jon with mingled awe and fear, as though expecting to be scorched by dragon flame. Jon shook his head with an awkward smile. Not today, but see that my horse is well exercised. I'd like to ride tomorrow for a turn around the city walls. The stable boy bobbed his head and scurried off, and Jon remained in place, watching the bustle of the courtyard. Servants dashed about, arms full of bread crates and mead jugs, preparing for a midday feast that some minor lord had requested to curry favor with the king. Along the walls, gold cloaks patrolled with pikes in hand. Somewhere in the corner, he heard the clang of steel as a few knights practiced. The Red Keep was its own world, vibrant and dangerous, full of secrets and alliances. He felt dwarfed by the swirl of it even after these weeks. A voice pulled him from his thoughts. Snow. Targaryen, whichever name you prefer. He turned to see Jaime Lannister walking toward him, clad in a gleaming breastplate. The Kingslayer, they called him behind his back, but never to his face. There was a lazy confidence in his step, a half-smile that hinted at condescension. Surprised to see you out in the open. I was told you might be cowering in some tower, waiting for the next storm to pass. Jon bristled but kept his tone level. I find it better to face storms head-on, Ser Jaime. Did you come here with a purpose, or merely to trade barbs? Jaime's green eyes sparkled with amusement. A bit of both, perhaps. These walls have ears, as I'm sure you know, but I was curious to meet this new Targaryen up close. We've seen each other in passing, but not truly spoken. And rumor says you hold no love for your father's line. Interesting that, then again, you were raised by Ned Stark. one of the few men in this realm who might surpass me in self-righteousness. Jon's anger flared, but he forced himself to remain calm. Lord Stark raised me with honor. I doubt you'd understand. Jaime's smile was all bright teeth. I understand more than you think. Honor can be a heavy chain to wear. He drummed gloved fingers against his sword hilt. But enough about that. The king's men are leaving for the Riverlands soon, and I find myself curious. Will you be riding with them? Or does Robert prefer to keep you in a cage here? Jon bit back a sharp retort. His Grace has asked that I remain, as you surely know. Jaime's chuckle was low. Yes, well, the king is not subtle in his distrust, though he'll never admit how close he stands to certain ruin if the realm turned on him. Still, I suspect you're wise to stay behind. War is messy, and we wouldn't want a stray arrow claiming the last Targaryen scion. There was no mistaking the mocking tilt in his voice. Guard your back, boy. Here or out there, it makes no difference. Daggers wait in every shadow. With that, he strolled off. Jon glared after him, a dozen responses burning on his tongue. But Jaime Lannister was a cunning man, and a more skilled fighter than almost anyone at court. Jon had no wish to draw steel over words alone. Still, the Kingslayer's warning echoed in his mind. Daggers wait in every shadow. A shiver crawled along Jon's spine, and he found himself wishing he were 1,000 leagues away from King's Landing. But the day pressed on, and there were tasks to occupy him. Ned had suggested Jon learn the intricacies of courtly life so as to better defend himself against the swirl of politics. That meant attending small functions, greeting lesser lords who came to the capital, and listening to countless petitions about taxes, trade routes, and disputes. It was mind-numbing at times, but Jon understood the necessity. If he was to survive, he had to show the realm that he was not some half-feral bastard of the North, nor a secret pretender warming a seat for rebellion. He was simply Jon, no longer Snow, not fully Targaryen in spirit, but a man forging his own path. At midday, he found himself in an antechamber just off the throne room. A group of lords from the Crownlands had come to beg for a hearing on some boundary dispute. The chamber was stuffy, crowded with minor nobles garbed in bright velvets and silks, all seeking a moment of royal attention. Robert, of course, had not bothered to attend. He was hunting boar in the Kingswood, or so the rumor went. So the duties fell to whichever council members were present, along with a handful of watchers like Jon, who were there to observe. Lord Baelish drifted over at one point, his sly grin pinned in place. He bowed slightly. My Lord Targaryen, or do you still prefer the name Snow? Jon forced a tight smile. Jon is fine. Jon it is then. Littlefinger let the silence linger just long enough to be uncomfortable. How's the day treating you? All these lords with their trifling spats and entreaties, quite a bore, is it not? I try to learn from it, Jon said, and it's not for me to call their concerns trifling. What might be trifling to you could be the difference between life and death for a smallfolk farmer. Littlefinger chuckled. How very honorable. Ned Stark has trained you well indeed, but be careful not to drown in that sense of justice. King's Landing can be an unforgiving sea. He leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially. If you ever find yourself in need of a friend or a loan, I do manage the realm's coin, and I'm always happy to invest in interesting futures. Jon stepped back, distrust tightening his gut. I'll keep that in mind. Baelish gave a little bow and slipped away, leaving Jon to watch the lords bicker about a tract of land near a stream. The hours crawled by, filled with more of the same. By the time evening shadows began to fall, Jon's head throbbed with tension, and he found himself longing for the quiet forest paths of the north. Only the memory of Ned's advice kept him seated. A wise man must learn all facets of rulership, even the tedious ones. If the realm ever faced another great conflict, no measure of skill with a sword would be enough. A king, whether legitimate or not, must know how to manage the realm's peace as well as its war. Jon had no intention of claiming the crown, but he recognized that the knowledge might be crucial if fate forced his hand. After the last of the petitions had been concluded, Jon slipped away. He felt stifled by the castle, by the walls that hemmed him in. He made his way to the stables, intending to borrow his horse for a short ride before night fell. A soft breeze carried the scents of hay and horse manure, oddly comforting in its earthiness. He found his mount, an even-tempered gray courser, and swung into the saddle, ignoring the alarmed glance from a pair of stable hands. They might have worried about letting the Targaryen bastard roam free, but Jon paid them no mind. accompanied by 2 gold cloaks. Robert's men insisted he never ride alone outside the gates. Jon guided his horse through the city streets. The setting sun tinged King's Landing with ruddy light. Hawkers called out from stalls, selling fish from Blackwater Bay or onions from nearby fields. Children darted about, chasing each other in alleyways. Jon felt their curious stares. Perhaps word had spread that the rumored dragon prince lived among them. To these common folk, he was yet another puzzle in a city that thrived on gossip. He took little note of the city's noise, letting the horse's steady gait calm him. Passing through an archway, he glimpsed the great sept in the distance, its domes reflecting the dying light. The 7 might watch over the city, but Jon felt more kinship with the old gods, whose presence he could not find in any weirwood this far south. The gold cloaks following behind him whispered among themselves, though he could not catch their words. He assumed it was about him. Everything was about him these days. As the sky darkened, he returned to the Red Keep, handing off his horse to the stable hands. Lanterns flared along the castle corridors, throwing flickering patterns across the stone floors. Jon's stomach rumbled. He realized he'd missed the evening meal while out riding, so he made for the kitchen to grab whatever might remain. Along the way, he crossed paths with Arya, his youngest sister, no cousin, dashing through the halls with her dark hair flying behind her. "Jon!" she cried, brightening at the sight of him. "Come quick! I was looking for you. Sansa and Jane and the rest are in the Solar. But never mind them. Father said I might train with Syrio tonight, and I need you to watch. He's teaching me a new stance." Despite his weariness, Jon's heart lifted. He recalled how Arya had always been something of an outlier among her siblings, more comfortable with a wooden sword than a sewing needle. "I'd be glad to come," he said gently, though his stomach still growled. "Let me just find a bite of bread. Then I'll be right there." She nodded eagerly. "Don't take too long." And with that, she sped off, nimble as a cat in her worn slippers. Jon found a kitchen boy who offered him a heel of bread and a chunk of cheese. He wolfed it down, then followed Arya's trail to a small courtyard that Ned had arranged for her private lessons. Syrio Farrell, the Braavosi water dancer, stood at the center, slender sword in hand. Arya tried to mirror his stance, brow furrowed in concentration. Jon lingered at the edge, content to watch. Syrio's voice, lilting with the accent of Braavos, guided Arya through each movement. "Left foot, pivot, see? The blade is as an extension of your arm, little one. You must feel it, not force it. Yes, better. Now again." Arya darted forward, stumbling slightly, then caught herself and delivered a quick thrust. Syrio deftly parried, his blade a silver flash. She huffed with frustration. Jon couldn't help but smile. He remembered the early days of his own sword training, how every misstep felt like a colossal failure. But Arya had a spark in her that refused to accept defeat. A true wolf spirit. They practiced until the sky was fully dark and the courtyard torches sputtered in the breeze. When Syrio dismissed Arya, she bounded over to Jon. "Did you see? I almost got him once. Next time, I will." Jon nodded. "I believe you. You move quickly. Better than most boys twice your size." He ruffled her hair, ignoring her scowl. She hated being reminded that she was smaller than the squires. "Keep at it, Arya. Syrio's a skilled teacher." She grinned, her expression open and fearless. "I will. I want to be the best swordsman there ever was. Or swordswoman, I mean. Who cares about the name? I'll beat them all." A twinge of worry flickered in Jon. He recalled how dangerous the realm had become, how easily the innocent dreams of childhood could be crushed. But he forced a reassuring smile. "Then you will, if you keep your determination." He paused, glancing around. "Come on, I'll walk you to your chamber. It's late." They walked together, and Arya chatted happily about her lessons, about some spats Sansa had with Jane Poole, about how boring court dinners could be. For a little while, Jon let himself forget his burdens. Arya's warmth reminded him that not everything in the Red Keep was cloak and dagger. The Starks, his cousins, his family in every way that mattered, still offered him a sense of belonging. After parting ways, he found his own chamber near Ned's quarters. When he finally settled into bed, his mind churned with questions. How long could he remain in King's Landing without stirring more trouble? Would Ned's mission to the Riverlands be a mere footnote of law enforcement, or would it unearth deeper conspiracies? And what of King Robert's mood? Would he return from the hunt in good spirits or in a drunken rage? The next day began with a summons. Dawn was barely a pink smudge on the horizon when a page knocked on Jon's door, breathless. "My lord, Lord Stark wants you at once in his solar." Jon splashed water on his face and dressed quickly, a sense of foreboding twisting in his gut. When he arrived at Ned's solar, he found his father-uncle seated behind a desk strewn with letters while a scribe hovered nearby. Ned waved the scribe off, and when the man departed, he beckoned Jon closer, voice grave. "Word has come from the north of the Trident. These brigands, they're worse than we suspected. Lord Tully's men engaged a group of them, and half the Tully men were slain. The outlaws vanished into the countryside, but they left a message behind. They claimed to fight for the true dragon. That would be you, Jon." Jon's stomach lurched. "Gods, I don't even know them. Why invoke my name?" "Because it suits them," Ned said, massaging his temples. "Or they truly believe you stand against Robert. Either way, it's a problem. The Tullys are outraged. King Robert is certain to be furious, and Tywin Lannister has already sent a raven to the king, urging swift retribution. We must act." Jon thought of Robert's likely reaction. "The king will think I'm behind this somehow." Ned nodded heavily. "That's why we have to show the realm you disavow these outlaws. In writing, in front of witnesses. A firm denunciation. Whatever it takes," Jon agreed quickly. "I want no part in their violence." Ned breathed out in relief. "I've already drafted a statement. We'll proclaim that you, Jon Targaryen, declare these brigands traitors to the crown as well as to yourself, and demand they lay down arms immediately. We'll put the Stark and Baratheon seals on it, so no one can question its authenticity." Jon rubbed the back of his neck. "Do you think that will be enough?" "It has to be. Robert is livid as is. If we don't move swiftly, he might lash out." Ned's face darkened. "He's calling you a threat again behind closed doors, or so Varys's whispers say. This condemnation must reach every corner of the realm. We'll send ravens far and wide." Jon swallowed the knot in his throat. "Let's do it then." That morning, Ned and Jon met with Grand Maester Pycelle to finalize the official letter. Pycelle fussed over the wording, making it as grandiose as possible. By midday, the letter was inscribed on multiple parchments, sealed with wax bearing both the direwolf of Stark and the crowned stag of Baratheon. Jon was made to sign as Jon of House Targaryen, recognized ward of Eddard Stark, with loyalty sworn to the Iron Throne. Jon hesitated at the last line, but he understood the necessity. Every vow needed to be reaffirmed, or the realm would suspect him of treason. They dispatched ravens in all directions. The text was simple enough. Jon Targaryen denies any association with the brigands terrorizing the Trident, condemns them as criminals, and calls upon all good subjects to aid in their apprehension. And in a flourish that must have pained Ned to write, the letter ended with, "Let it be known that I, Jon Targaryen, uphold the rule of King Robert Baratheon, and shall not abide any who seek to sow discord in my name." When it was done, Jon felt a weary relief. "I hope this will stop the bloodshed," he murmured, but Ned merely shook his head, looking unconvinced. Outside, the day had grown cloudy, as if the sky shared their mood. In the days that followed, the Red Keep buzzed with talk of Jon's denunciation. Some lords scoffed that it was meaningless words on parchment, that brigands would never lay down arms simply because they were called criminals. Others believed it was a cunning ploy, Jon proclaiming innocence while secretly encouraging the outlaws. Jon heard these rumors secondhand, wincing at how every action he took could be twisted. But he set his jaw and carried on, reminding himself that he had done what was right. King Robert returned to the city not long after. His hunting party was in a foul mood. The king had found no great boar to slay, only smaller game, and his frustration spilled out in curses and drunken tirades. Jon took care to remain out of Robert's direct path. But one evening, the king caught sight of him in a corridor. Robert's eyes narrowed. Wine stained his beard. "You," he snarled, stepping forward so abruptly that Jon's guards tensed. "I heard about your damn letter. Good. Let everyone see you condemn those who break my peace." Jon dipped his head. "I meant every word, Your Grace." Robert's face twisted in a sneer. Then pray your words stop the killing. If they don't, the blame might fall where I choose to put it." He gave Jon a rough shove with one meaty hand against his shoulder, enough to make Jon stagger. Then the king stumbled off, muttering about false heirs and Targaryen treachery. Jon stood there, breath coming fast, anger and humiliation warring in his chest. The gold cloaks who witnessed the exchange looked away, pretending ignorance. Robert was the king. He could shove whoever he pleased. Yet each time Jon's eyes closed that night, he saw again the raw hatred in Robert's face, and he wondered if this precarious arrangement could hold much longer. In the following week, word came that Ned would indeed depart for the Riverlands to coordinate efforts against the outlaws. He would travel with a small force of Stark men, plus some loyal knights from the Crownlands to show that the king's authority was behind him. Before leaving, Ned summoned Jon to his private chambers once more. "I hate to leave you in King's Landing without me here," Ned said, speaking in that hushed, fatherly tone Jon had heard so many times in Winterfell. "But I must handle this situation personally. The Tullys are my wife's kin, and Robert insists I see it through. You must stay behind and weather this storm." Jon tried to sound confident. "I can manage, father. I'll keep to my vow and remain above suspicion." Ned's gaze flicked to the sword at Jon's hip. Longclaw, the Valyrian steel blade the old Bear Mormont would one day give him, though here we might say it was given or not. But that might conflict with the show/book timeline. Let's carefully remain vague. Perhaps it's just a decent blade Ned provided him, or he might not have Valyrian steel at all yet. We'll be discreet. Ned sighed. "Just be vigilant. Cersei's watchers are everywhere, and if the Lannisters sense Robert's mood turning further, they might act. I suspect Lord Tywin sees you as a threat to his grandchildren's succession. He might attempt to remove that threat." Jon nodded grimly. "I understand." With that, they embraced one last time. An odd warmth filled Jon's chest, reminding him that no matter the Targaryen blood in his veins, Ned Stark was the father who had raised him. Before the sun was fully up, Ned departed with his men, the clatter of hooves echoing through the courtyard as they rode out. Jon watched from a balcony until the company vanished from sight, a hollow ache in his gut. Left in the Red Keep without Ned's steady presence, Jon felt every gaze intensify. Servants seemed uncertain whether to bow or scurry away when he passed. Some knights offered curt nods, while others pointedly refused to acknowledge him. If Robert had once tolerated Ned's authority, now the king had no buffer. Jon was on his own, except for a handful of Stark men left behind to watch over Sansa and Arya and, tangentially, him. Yet those men were limited in what they could do. He poured his energy into training. Day after day, Jon sparred in the yard, sometimes with the Master-at-Arms, sometimes with any knight who would oblige him. He found a certain solace in the ring of steel, in the clarity of combat where cunning words held no sway. More than once, he found Jaime Lannister watching from a distance, a faint smirk on his lips. But Ser Jaime never volunteered to cross swords with him. Perhaps he saw no challenge in facing a youth, or perhaps he was wary of fueling rumors. One noon, after an exhausting match that left Jon's arms quivering, he retreated to a secluded corner of the yard to catch his breath. A shadow fell across him. Looking up, he saw none other than Queen Cersei Lannister. She wore a gown of deep green, trimmed with gold, and carried herself with the poise of a lioness surveying prey. Jon scrambled to his feet, unsettled by her sudden appearance. "Your Grace," he said carefully. She regarded him through half-lidded eyes. "You've been quite the topic at court, Jon Targaryen. Some say your letter to those brigands was a clever ruse. Others think it genuine." Jon set his jaw. "I wrote it so no more blood would be shed in my name." "How noble," she purred. Her gaze flicked over him as though assessing him from head to toe. "You have your mother's dark hair, yet your eyes, they remind me of something else. A memory, perhaps." She let out a quiet laugh. "Your father had violet eyes, or so they say. I never met him, but I often heard tales of Rhaegar Targaryen's beauty. The realm despises his memory now, but there was a time he was exalted. Heroes fall so quickly, don't they?" Jon forced himself to remain polite. "I wouldn't know, Your Grace. I've only heard scraps of stories." Cersei took a step closer, close enough that Jon caught the faint scent of jasmine. "You have no ambition for the throne, you claim. Yet here you are, wearing the name Targaryen in my husband's court. A curious choice, especially for one who says he wants peace." "I only want my true name," Jon said, voice low but firm. "If I had wanted the throne, I would have made that known long before now." Cersei's smile did not reach her eyes. And yet, there are those in the realm who would thrust it upon you, regardless of your will. Power is a strange beast. It often grows beyond one's control. Her green eyes glittered. As queen, I too am familiar with the burden of power, and with the threats that arise whenever one's family is at stake. Let me be blunt, Jon Targaryen, if you ever come between my children and what is theirs, I will crush you. Now or a decade from now, it makes no difference. Jon felt a spike of cold anger, but he forced calm. I have no desire to harm your children, your grace. She offered a small incline of her head. Then we understand each other, don't we? Without waiting for a reply, she turned and strode away, leaving Jon with the distinct feeling that he had just encountered a predator warning away a rival. He exhaled, tension coiling in his gut. For all Robert's drunken rages, it was Cersei who radiated a more deliberate menace. She had threatened him calmly, as if she were describing the weather. It chilled him to realize how many forces in King's Landing would prefer him dead or at the very least powerless. That evening, the king held a feast to celebrate the name day of one of his oldest war companions, some minor lord who had fought alongside him during the rebellion. The great hall was filled with music and laughter that rang hollow to Jon's ears. He went through the motions of polite conversation, exchanging a few stiff words with the lords seated near him, forcing a polite smile at their awkward attempts to discuss the Targaryen question. Across the hall, Robert held court at the head table, bellowing for more wine. Cersei S. At his side, her face a porcelain mask. At one point, Robert called for Jon to come forward. The sudden hush that fell across the hall was deafening. Jon rose, heart pounding. He could feel every eye boring into him as he walked the length of the hall to stand before the raised dais. Robert scratched his beard, eyeing Jon with something like grudging respect mixed with suspicion. My old friend's name day, he declared, raising his goblet toward the minor lord in question. He fought valiantly to bring down your father, boy. Did you know that? Jon did not flinch. I did not, your grace. But if he fought under your banner, he must have been a brave man indeed. Robert let out a boisterous laugh. Some of the tension in the room eased. Ha! So you can say the right words when you need to. Maybe you are learning how to play this game after all. Here, he snatched a flagon of wine from a servant and thrust it toward Jon. Drink to the realm's peace, Targaryen. Let all these lords witness your toast. Jon accepted the flagon, aware that refusing would cause an uproar. He lifted it, meeting Robert's gaze. The king's eyes shone with a challenge, as if daring Jon to falter. To the realm's peace, Jon said loudly, then took a deep swallow. The wine burned down his throat, but he kept his expression neutral. Robert clapped him on the shoulder hard enough to make Jon stagger. Good lad, he roared, turning his attention back to the feast. Now get on with you. I've a boar to carve. Jon bowed and retreated, shoulders tight under the stares of the assembled courtiers. He returned to his seat, ignoring the nervous murmurs around him. If this was Robert's notion of acceptance, it was the acceptance of a man who enjoyed toying with a caged animal. In the days after that feast, news arrived from the Riverlands. Ned and his men had engaged a large group of the brigands, capturing or killing many. A handful escaped, but the heart of their group was broken. Lord Tully sent word that the situation was largely under control. Jon felt immense relief. At least one menace had been subdued. But with that relief came a new undercurrent of worry. The rumor mill suggested that some of the outlaws, before they fell, claimed to have support from across the narrow sea. Whispers reached King's Landing that Viserys and Daenerys Targaryen, the other remnants of the old royal line, might be seeking allies to reclaim the Seven Kingdoms. Jon had never met those exiled Targaryens, nor did he have any illusions of their loyalties. Would they see him as a rival claimant or a potential ally? One afternoon, as Jon took his meal in a quiet alcove, Varys appeared, silent as a phantom. Jon looked up with a start to find the spy master smiling gently. Forgive me for intruding, Varys cooed. I have tidings from abroad that might interest you. Jon set aside his trencher of bread. I doubt your news is ever uninteresting, Lord Varys. The eunuch tittered softly. You are too kind. Word is that Daenerys Targaryen is with child. She has wed a Dothraki Khal, they say, and if the babe is a boy, he would be a Targaryen airborne among the horse lords. Fascinating, is it not? Jon's stomach churned. I see. I suppose King Robert won't be pleased. Indeed not. His hatred for all Targaryens extends beyond the sea, Varys said, cocking his head. But what of you? These are your aunt and uncle in a manner of speaking. Do you have any feelings on the matter? Aunt and uncle, words that felt utterly foreign to Jon's ears. Rhaegar's siblings had been exiled before Jon was even born. I've never met them, he answered cautiously. I have no sense of them as family. If they intend to invade, I can't imagine it will go well for the realm. Varys nodded. Wise. An invasion by Dothraki hordes would be cataclysmic, but who knows if Daenerys or her brother truly intend that path. Times are uncertain, yes. Jon studied the spy master's face, trying to discern the deeper motive behind this conversation. Varys had a knack for gleaning secrets in the guise of harmless chatter. Times are uncertain indeed, Jon said, but my only loyalty is here to the realm's peace. Varys' smile widened. Such devotion. Let us hope others share it. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and do mind your safety, dear Jon. Whispers in the dark suggest that not all of King Robert's court holds you in grudging acceptance. Some hunger for a final end to any Targaryen line. Farewell. With that, he vanished as swiftly as he'd come, leaving Jon alone with his thoughts. The notion that Daenerys Targaryen was alive and expecting a child weighed on him unexpectedly. Here he stood, a Targaryen in everything but upbringing, contorting himself to avoid inciting King Robert, while across the sea an exiled princess carried the next generation of the dragon line. He felt strange stirrings of kinship and distance both. Part of him wondered if she would accept him as a cousin or if she'd see him as a pretender raised by the Starks. Another part of him wondered if this news would stoke Robert's violent impulses yet again. A few days later, a black mood descended on the Red Keep. Jon learned that Robert, upon hearing Varys' rumor, had flown into a rage in the council chamber, ranting about how the dragon spawn across the sea must be dealt with. Some claimed he wanted assassins sent after Daenerys, though Ned Stark, by Raven, implored him not to spill innocent blood. The debate raged behind closed doors, with lords taking sides. Jon stayed far clear of those meetings, for fear that Robert would see his face and be reminded of the old Targaryen threat. In a single moon's turn, Ned's forces finished quelling the brigands. Yet Ned did not hurry back. His letters suggested that trouble brewed elsewhere. Stray bits of rumor hinted at tensions in the Westerlands, that Tywin Lannister was massing troops for a show of power. Catelyn Stark, who had traveled partway to see her father in Riverrun, now found herself entangled in the region's politics. Jon gleaned only fragments of these developments from letters and secondhand talk. The realm was shifting, bracing for something. He could sense it in the crackling air. Meanwhile, Arya chafed under her forced stay in King's Landing. Sansa seemed to thrive on the courtly gossip, while Arya detested every frilly gown and formal courtesy. One evening, she slipped into Jon's chamber unannounced, her face flushed. "Jon, I'm tired of this place," she burst out. "Every time I try to practice with Syrio, I get stares. People whisper that I'm unladylike. Sansa calls me Horseface again, and it's all so stupid and petty. I miss Winterfell." Jon sighed, sitting on the edge of his bed to face her. "I miss it too, Arya, more than I can say. But Father will return soon, and I imagine he'll want us all to go back north once these troubles settle." Arya chewed her lip. "Do you really think so? Feels like we're trapped here. The king wants you close, and Sansa is all giddy about the possibility of future betrothals. Maybe she wants to marry a prince, who knows? And I just want to be free." Jon put a hand on her shoulder. "I do think we'll return. Let's endure a bit longer, for Father's sake. Besides, you have Syrio to teach you. That's more than you could have hoped for in Winterfell, right?" She nodded begrudgingly. "I suppose so." Then she looked at Jon earnestly. "You don't look happy either. Is it because of your name?" He forced a small smile. "Partly, yes. A lot's happened that I never asked for. But I have to face it." He ruffled her hair gently. "Now go on and rest. We'll do what we must until we can go home." When she left, he sat there in silence, contemplating what home even meant for him now. Winterfell, a place he loved but no longer felt fully entitled to claim. Yet King's Landing would never be his home, no matter the name he bore. He was a man caught between two worlds, two legacies, and there were days when he feared the tension would tear him apart. The next week brought fresh turmoil. A raven arrived in the night, bearing ill news. A northern lord, sworn to the Starks, had been ambushed and slain on his journey south. Whispers suggested Lannister involvement, though no proof existed. Tensions between the great houses simmered anew. Each rumor in the corridors now carried the spark of potential conflict. The gold cloaks seemed more numerous in the halls, as if the city prepared for a siege of suspicion. Jon attended a meeting of the small council, only to observe, though it felt more like standing in a den of vipers. Robert glowered at everyone present, hungover or drunk. Cersei wore a thin smile, offering pointed barbs about how the realm needed unity, while her father's name lingered in each unspoken threat. Renly seemed anxious, fidgeting and trying to keep the peace with jests. Varys contributed mild observations. Baelish teased out half-truths to stoke tension. Grand Maester Pycelle dozed at intervals. Jon realized with a sinking heart that Ned's absence had left Robert's reign teetering. The king lacked the stabilizing influence that Ned provided. Matters spiraled toward hostility between the Crown and House Lannister's rivals, or so it seemed. When the meeting ended, Robert confronted Jon as he was leaving. "You stay," the king barked. Jon stayed, bracing himself. Once they were alone, Robert sank onto a bench with a weary sigh. "I'm surrounded by damn fools and schemers," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "Your father, your uncle, whatever Ned is, he's the only man who doesn't lie to me. And he's off chasing bandits. Meanwhile, I have to deal with Tywin's arrogance. That old lion never forgave me for taking the throne he thought his grandson might someday inherit." Jon listened, unsure what to say. Robert lifted bloodshot eyes to him. "Tell me true, boy, if you had a chance to stand with me against the Lannisters, would you? Or would you slink away to your so-called rightful throne?" Jon shook his head. "I have no claim to push, your grace, and no desire to see the realm in war. If the Lannisters bring battle to the crown unjustly, I would do my duty to the realm." Robert studied him, then let out a grim laugh. "Duty to the realm. That's what Ned would say." He clapped Jon's shoulder again, gentler this time. "Perhaps you really are more wolf than dragon. Go, get some rest. I'll try not to kill anyone tonight." Jon took his leave, feeling as if he'd just navigated a precarious tightrope. Yet Robert's mention of standing against the Lannisters only heightened Jon's dread. Could war break out between the Crown and House Lannister? And where would that leave him? Even if he fought for Robert, half the realm would still see him as a Targaryen usurping the Baratheon seat. But if he stood aside, they'd call him a coward or traitor. There seemed no path that led to true peace. Days turned into weeks with no clear resolution. Ned's letter spoke of a tense standoff in the Riverlands, but at least the brigand threat was quelled. Catelyn had returned to Riverrun to nurse her ailing father. Tyrion Lannister, the imp, was rumored to be traveling somewhere in the Vale, causing further friction with House Arryn. The entire realm felt like a tangled web of simmering enmities. Jon tried to keep his head low, but he could not ignore the mounting tension. One twilight, as he walked the castle ramparts, he encountered Sansa gazing over the city. She wore a flowing gown, her red gold hair carefully arranged. "Jon," she said softly when she noticed him. "Do you think Father will send for us soon? I've heard whispers that we might stay here indefinitely. That I might be betrothed." Jon's heart sank. "Betrothed? To whom?" She shrugged, eyes turned to the glowing lights of the city below. "Some say Joffrey. Others speak of alliances with different lords. Mother used to talk about an alliance with the Baratheons, but everything's changed, hasn't it?" Jon didn't know what to say. The idea of Sansa wed to Joffrey, Robert's son, seemed a dreadful fate. The prince was known to be a cruel, temperamental boy. But Ned had once told him betrothals served the realm's politics more than personal happiness. "I'm not sure, Sansa," he said carefully. "Father will decide what's best." She nodded, lips pressed tight. "I suppose so. Sometimes I wish we'd never left Winterfell. Everything here is so grand, but also frightening. People talk behind their hands about you, about me, about Arya, about everything. It feels like we're all part of a story we can't control." Jon exhaled, sympathy welling. "We are, in a way. But we must play our roles as best we can." He placed a hand on her arm, trying to offer comfort. "We're still Starks, no matter what name people give me. And that counts for something." She managed a small smile. Then she turned back to the city. "Thank you, Jon." After a moment, she whispered, "You know, I overheard the Queen talking about you. She told someone that if war comes, she'll see your head on a spike before she lets the realm crown you." She was smiling when she said it. Jon closed his eyes briefly, the words hitting him like a blow to the chest. "I appreciate you telling me," he said quietly. "Stay safe, Sansa." She nodded and they parted. The night wind stirred Jon's cloak as he leaned on the rampart, gazing at the flickering city. He found himself wishing for the quiet yard at Winterfell, the rustle of weirwood branches, the familiar hush of snow. Yet winter was far away, and here in King's Landing, a different kind of chill pervaded every hallway. The chill of unspoken threats, of alliances made and broken behind closed doors. On the morrow, a fresh raven from Ned arrived with instructions for Jon. Lord Stark indicated he would return soon, but he wanted Jon to begin preparations to leave King's Landing, to gather the Stark household and be ready to depart once the king permitted. Ned believed they might slip away if Robert's mood allowed it, or if some diplomatic resolution was reached with the Lannisters. The letter's final lines bore a warning: "We may face grave danger if the lines are drawn too sharply. If I do not arrive by the harvest, seek safe harbor elsewhere." The message left Jon uneasy. He stared at the parchment by candlelight, wondering if Ned anticipated a coming battle. If so, could it truly be avoided? He remembered the last rebellion, Robert's rebellion. Rhaegar had died at the Trident, thousands died on both sides. Now new tensions threatened. This time, Jon was no infant shielded in a cradle. If war came, he would be forced to choose a side, and whichever choice he made would lead to blood. Yet there was no stopping the march of events, only bracing for them. Jon rose from his seat and made for the yard, intending to drill with his sword. The only sense of clarity he found was in the ring of steel, the sweat on his brow, the primal knowledge of parry and thrust. So much of politics was intangible and slippery. In a fair fight, at least one new friend from foe. As he practiced, he felt the eyes of the castle upon him, some watchful, some suspicious, some curious. They could call him Targaryen or bastard or wolf or dragon's pawn. Let them. All he knew was that he bore within him the memory of Lyanna Stark and the secret name of Rhaegar Targaryen's heir. He would not run from that truth, nor would he let it define him entirely. The sun beat down as he worked through the drills. He thought of Ned riding back, of the unknown fate of Daenerys across the sea, of Tywin Lannister in Casterly Rock. He wondered if the realm tottered on the edge of another great war and if he was doomed to be the match that lit the fire. Each thrust of the sword became a silent vow that if the realm burned, he would strive to spare the innocent, to uphold the honor that Ned Stark had instilled in him. Whether that made him friend or foe to Robert or to any other power in the Seven Kingdoms, he could not say. But as the sweat dripped from his brow, he steadied his blade and whispered to himself, "I am Jon. I am both wolf and dragon, yet I serve the realm's peace." And in that moment, under the glaring southern sun, it felt like all he had left and all he would ever need.